You missed all of my witty jokes.
What's that?
There'll be more. This is like, I'm too short for this. I can't stand behind this podium. You're gonna have to move that camera.
Is that, are you sliding off the lectern? Because there used to be like a thing for your computer, but now I think it's broken.
It doesn't seem to slide though.
That doesn't slide.
Yeah.
You tell me when.
We're good.
Are we live right now?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, it's happening. Okay, hi everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. My name is Rebecca Lopez-Chris. I am the Deputy Commissioner for Policy and Outreach at the Philadelphia Department of Revenue. We are coming at you live from the Municipal Services Building in Center City, Philadelphia, and we're filming in front of a live audience. And I hope that they make tons of noise at some point.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. So today we're here to talk about an outreach sort of tool that the Department of Revenue has developed as part of a larger, kind of a larger initiative to address inequality in Philadelphia. So here's how the day will work. I'm saying welcome. That will happen. Check. We are also we're going to get a demo from the developers and the creators of the tool, and then we'll do a little bit of a panel Q&A, and we hope that folks have great questions. I'm sure there's folks in the room who will have questions, and then we'll go from there. So again, thank you all for coming, and if you are coming at us live, thank you so much for watching, and we hope to include more programming like this in the future. Do you want to? Go ahead. All right, so I'm going to introduce, first of all, I do want to thank, the man behind the camera is Christian Crespo.
Chris.
And if you don't know who he is and you do any sort of community organizing in Philadelphia, like, you need to know who he is. So you need to reach out to us on social media, any of them, on either like on Facebook or on X or on YouTube here. We're on LinkedIn. Find us as PhilaRevenue, PhilaRevenue. Thank you. Oh, man. Whew, my work here is done. Also, here in the room are some of our policy folks, Jack Dennison and Larry Smith, and also the Chief Data Officer for the Department of Revenue. Is that right?
Close enough.
Okay, great. He sort of manages the team that built this tool. So I'm going to introduce Julia and Justine. Julia Flanagan.
Yes.
Justine Cohn. You guys all have little initials in your names, and I'm always
It's throwing everyone off.
It does. All right, Julie Flanagan. I'm going to turn it over to you and tell the people who you are, and then we'll hear more about this. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. I hope you can hear me all right in the back.
Talk really loud.
Okay. Welcome. As Rebecca mentioned, my name is Julia Flanagan. I'm joined with my colleague Justine Cohn. We are data analysts with the Department of Revenue's Data and Research Unit. We are here today to talk to you about the Racial Equity Outreach Map, which is now publicly available via ArcGIS Online. This comes in the form of a story map, which is a website that integrates maps, text, and images to better contextualize our results. If you follow the link, this is what you'll see. We just have, the title, a little blurb at the top. An important feature here I'm going to point out is this bar. This is going to take you to different points within the story map. And I'm just going to start with the introduction. So this project was this was an action item from Revenue's Racial Equity Action Plan, a part of the previous administration's Racial Equity Initiative. The goal of Revenue's Racial Equity Initiative is to improve the financial well-being of BIPOC taxpayers and water customers. This can sometimes seem as in opposition with the goal of the Revenue Department, which is to collect taxes from these same customers. But Revenue's assistance programs exist to bridge the gap between these two goals, allowing customers to avoid bad outcomes such as share sales and water shutoffs while remaining tax compliant. So, Revenue has numerous really progressive real estate tax and water assistance programs, which are listed here. I'm going to point out two specifically. Those are the owner-occupied payment agreement program, known as UPA, and water's tiered assistance program, known as TAP. Later on, we're going to talk about using enrollment data in these two programs as metrics in our overall outreach index. All of these programs are subject to eligibility requirements, including but not limited to being a senior citizen, low income, or being an owner-occupant. The Revenues Communications team educates residents on these programs through a series of in-person and virtual events, as well as call campaigns and letter campaigns. Despite extensive outreach efforts, we estimate that only 75% of eligible households are enrolled in programs. So how do we get the other 25%? Well, the issue is we lack some basic demographic data that would tell us who is eligible for these programs. We don't necessarily know which households are owner-occupied, we don't know household income, and we don't know the age of householders. So we don't have this data, but we can use data from the Census Bureau to get this information at a geographic level. And if we use a small enough geographic level, such as a census tract, we can get a pretty good sense of a demographic profile for a certain area. So combining data from our own department, as well as data from the census, we can find groups where there are high eligibility but low enrollment in our assistance programs, with a focus on BIPOC communities. Next, Justine is going to discuss these 11 metrics we have chosen in our overall outreach index.
Great, thanks, Julia. All right, let us go here. Okay, so as Julia mentioned, there are 11 metrics. We came up with these through numerous discussions with the Racial Equity Working Group. And we categorize them basically into 4 main categories of data, and then among those total are 11 metrics. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into detail with each metric, but I will touch on all of them. And you can obviously dig into them on your own because we do include the maps for each metric in this website. So up at the top here with that navigation bar that Julia was talking about, you can click on the links for each of the metrics. So here, this way, this is the map for our first metric, which is the percent of the population who identifies as people of color. We included this as well as one other demographic metric in order to keep an equity lens. The other metric is right after that, and it's the percent who identify as Hispanic or Latina. And then the next category we looked at, it continues to be demographic data, but we're really focusing on the type of information that the department uses to determine eligibility for the assistance programs. So here I have up median household income. We also looked at the percent of people who are seniors. We looked at the percent of households that are owner-occupied, and we looked at the percent of households with kids enrolled in public assistance programs. So this was really just to get a sense of who was eligible, and then the next category we looked at is enrollment data, so who's already enrolled. So we're looking for areas where even if there is a lot of need, a lot of eligibility, we're already meeting that need, we're doing well with the enrollment, and then of course we're looking for areas where that's not true. So this right here is the percent of delinquent residential properties enrolled in payment agreements, specifically those UPAs, those owner-occupied payment agreements that Julia mentioned. And then this category also includes the percent of residential properties with water delinquency that are enrolled in Water's Tiered Assistance Program, or TAP. And then the final category we looked at is related to tax delinquency. So that's really looking at that need. And so this here is the percent of residential properties with real estate delinquency. We also looked at the percent with referrals to collection agencies for real estate tax, and the percent with a water delinquency. So we have these 11 discrete metrics, and I'm gonna pass it back to Julia, and she's gonna explain how we took these different metrics and combined them into one single score. All right.
So we're going to talk through our last two tabs, which are sources and methodology. If you select sources, you'll just see some more detailed information on the census data tables we've used, as well as slightly more information on our revenue data sources. And jumping to methodology, a more detailed explanation of how we combine those 11 metrics. So I'm just going to touch on this and kind of our thinking behind creating an index. The reason we did this is because there is no one metric that perfectly captures this relationship between assistance provided by the department and need for that assistance. So using all 11 metrics, we created a composite outreach score. Each metric was sorted and divided into quintiles, or 5 buckets of equal size, and reclassified with a score ranging from 1 to 5, where 1 indicated the lowest priority for outreach and 5 indicated the highest priority for outreach. Here we have an example, 2 examples of how this plays out. We have 2 census tracts here. One is Bella Vista and one is North Square in Kensington. So Bella Vista is the census tract with the lowest priority for outreach, and North Square is one of 9 that was the top for priority for outreach. So in terms of demographics, we see we have 2 metrics here. It is the percent of residents that identify as people of color or Latina, and we can see that North Square scores higher in both of these categories, 4 out of 5 and a 5 out of 5. Next, we can see in terms of program eligibility, residents of North Square are more eligible for our assistance programs. The exception being that 3rd metric, which Justine slightly touched on, owner occupancy is a criteria for all of our assistance programs with the exception of TAP, but it doesn't necessarily indicate need. So we see that North Square has lower owner occupancy rates than in Bella Vista. Next, for program enrollment, we see that residents of North Square have lower enrollment, thus higher scores overall in these areas. And lastly, for tax delinquencies, we see that residents of North Square are more tax delinquent. So all of these 11 individual metrics add together for a total score of 20 for Bella Vista and 46 for North Square. And this is out of the highest possible score of 55, so we can see North Square really isn't too far off that highest possible score. And we wanted to walk through this just to illustrate how the scoring worked, as well as to really drive home the point that not all of our metrics paint the same picture, but they help to tell a really nuanced story between assistance need and eligibility at a granular level. Next, I'm going to pass it back to Justine, who's going to show us our final outreach map.
Great, thank you. All right. Okay, so here we have our outreach map. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. So these are our results. These black borders here are just the boundaries for the city council districts. So those are just there for reference. And then, like with all of the input maps, all of the maps in this program, in this website, the darker color is going to be that higher score. So in this case, that dark red is indicating those with that higher overall outreach score. And then these tracks that are outlined in blue, those are the 9 that had the top score. So those are really the focus areas. And if you click on a tract, in this case I wanted to click on, this is North Square, the tract that Julia was just going through. So you don't just get the overall score. In this pop-up, you're also going to get all of the information for those metrics that go into creating the score. And so you can get a really quick glance for sort of like the makeup of that area. And in this case, so the overall score is 46. Right below that, you can see median household income is only $34,000. So it's very quick and easy to realize why this area might benefit from increased outreach. And so I'm going to pass it back to Rebecca so that she can talk a little bit about how these results are going to be used for outreach.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. I think this project is really, really exciting, I think, to the department, and I hope to the city, and I hope to anyone who's watching or who's in the room right now. I hope you can see the value of some of the work that we're trying to do, and that the city of Philadelphia is not a monolith. Like, right, there's lots and lots of, or I guess what I should say is the Department of Revenue is not always the bad guy, right? Like, we're working to improve outcomes just as much as anyone else in the city. So it's like a very exciting opportunity for us to work with others. Okay, so Justine asked me to talk about some of the work that the Department of Revenue is doing around communications, and this is where we really need audience, to support us. But that being said, we work with elected officials, we work with our partners in the water department, we work with any number of community stakeholders. And partially that's because no one wants to talk to us at all. They have zero interest in opening our mail. They do not want to engage with us, but they will definitely engage with their elected official. And so these types of partnerships are absolutely crucial. So we plan to do things like door to door. If we have 9 census tracts that we know are high priority, that's like a manageable amount of effort to get to those folks. Like, we can run lists of all the delinquent properties and show up in person and say, hey, here's information about this really important thing that will help protect your home from sheriff's sale. We've also done neighborhood pop-ups, like neighborhood office hours, and that is always has to be in collaboration with another group. This is like a really exciting opportunity to look at where are these concentrations, and then pinpoint where's the community center, where's the rec center, where's the thing in that census tract that is a community convener, and let's do a mailing directly to 1 mile around, right? So then if folks, they show up and they're missing documentation, they're close enough they can just run home and get it. And we can help them on the spot, we can enroll them on the spot in any number of programs that help reduce their tax bill, help make their water bill affordable, as well as protect their home from sheriff's sale. And we are also in the process of putting together print ads for community newspapers. I think it's really great that if we were able to advertise in all the biggies, right? The Inquirer and on the major radio stations. But I think ultimately it's the community papers that I think we want to try and get to. And so that we're working with an external vendor right now to develop culturally competent messaging. And I think one of the maps that I really like here is the percent of folks who's the Hispanic and Latine percentages. I think that's a really informative map because it helps us make sure that we are appropriately translating materials and working with people in the language that they most prefer. Also, just knowing that about a particular census tract, fortunately, the census is so generous with its data, we can go in and see the percentage of foreign-born folks and what languages do they speak, and we kind of feel like this type of project is meant to be a jumping off point, right, for us to develop strategies specific for a particular community with the direct input of both of the folks who are in that community, right? I don't want to talk at people. I want to work with the folks who work with those communities already and make sure that we're making ourselves available and meeting folks where they are. And just even things like this, trying to, this is an awesome, if the people in the room, if you were watching this online, it looks so slick, okay? There are things whizzing in and out, and Christian keeps going to the map and back and forth, and that's awesome, that's really, really cool, but that doesn't mean, there's so many folks who are not on YouTube, who are not, gonna check us out on Facebook, and so how do we get to those people? That's really the big question. How do we bridge the gap on that 25% of folks who still don't know that there's a senior citizen tax freeze, who need to know about the new low income tax freeze that City Council just passed for their upcoming 2025 real estate tax bill. So that's some really exciting stuff. All right, should we go to the panel? All right, so we're gonna switch gears and we're gonna move to the panel, and I've got some questions for Julia and Justine, but we welcome any of the questions from the audience. Just feel free to raise your hand, interrupt. I'm an amiable person. I'm interruptible, so we're gonna move over. This is when the applause button would be going. Thank you so much, thank you. Okay, we're gonna pop, yeah, this is like, to your help. Okay, so, I mean, you mentioned that this is like sort of the culmination of a lot of work from a lot of people in the department. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about that initiative and who was involved and what some of the results were?
Sure. I may bring up Roman to assist since he was around at the very, very start of this. But basically, this is actually kind of, as Rebecca alluded to, not the initial iteration of this. So initially when, as a department, we were trying to sort of figure out how to gauge where we were at and then how to gauge whether we were improving. There were different metrics that people were sort of bouncing around. And so we had initially mapped these metrics, a few of these separately, as a way to sort of gauge how we were doing. But one of the problems that kind of came up was that because they don't all tell the same story, it wasn't really getting any traction. So there were a whole lot of people throughout the department who sort of saw these or were involved, but it wasn't really moving forward into any sort of policy action happening. And so that's where we came up with the idea of combining multiple metrics into one index. So it's one score that you can read and you can say, boom, we're focusing on these people. So that's sort of how that translated. And then sort of working with both, we had a smaller group within revenue. There was also a larger working group full of people who were not just data people throughout the department. And then we also worked with people throughout the city to really make sure that the metrics that we had were sort of capturing everything that we wanted without kind of overdoing it, making it overly complicated, because we really wanted this to be something that a lot of different people could understand like pretty quickly.
And the working group that you mentioned, I mean, that was across unit collaboration. Was there like, how many people were on that committee? Like 25? 25 across the entire department. You know, all the working group was very conscientious about how we had folks, who was representing, like who was in the room, and making sure that we were hearing all of the voices across the department.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
So overall, I mean, it's awesome to have this data and to be able to point in directions and show us which neighborhoods need the most outreach. But I guess I'm just wondering, can you take a quick step back? What is it exactly we're trying to connect them to? So you had mentioned like this about the seniors, you mentioned about low income freeze. So the data is great, but what exactly is it that we're trying to connect them to?
Sure, absolutely. So the question, if folks didn't hear it, is that what are we trying to do here, right? I think that the answer is that there are a number of programs like Homestead, which, you know, reduce your tax bill now by over $1,300, and there will be a significant number of properties that will have no tax bill, and we still go out to the community and people say, I don't know what you're talking about. That's too good to be true. I don't believe you. That program's been in place for over 10 years. And so basically we're trying to find a tool that will demonstrate the gap of like who we think might be eligible and where we're not making headway. You know what I'm saying? One more question. Yes, sir.
So, from what I got, you said some of the people that you don't reach, you use their community newspapers. I'm a lifelong resident of Philadelphia, and I can say that the most marginalized and underserved communities don't have community So how do you reach them?
Oh, I think this is an excellent question. So for those who might not have heard, how do we reach marginalized communities who don't have community newspapers, as an example of something that I made? I think this is a great opportunity for us to partner, like both with existing community groups that are doing work in that area and also with the elected official, right? Like, who knows this community best? In the past, we have done work directly focusing on immigrant communities, and in that particular example, we worked with a group in Southwest Philadelphia called AFRICOM, who basically, they had already an audience for a podcast and for WhatsApp. We don't use WhatsApp. Like, we don't have a WhatsApp account. I mean, I use it personally, but as a department, we don't know how to do that. It's not part of our strategy. But having that partner who knew that community uses that tool was crucial. Similarly, in that same project, we worked with somebody in Chinatown, and they used, WeChat, which is, it's another platform. It's used primarily by Chinese folks, both in China and in the United States. We don't have a presence on that platform, but the vendor or the community groups that we worked with, they do. And they know how to reach that audience in a more culturally competent way than like dopey me in Center City in a big tall building. So does that help answer your question?
Somewhat. Well, I mean, I'm curious. The majority of the population is African American in the city of Philadelphia, right? And I noticed that you did point out two immigrant communities, but in the African American community, which is the dominant population here, and most of those communities being marginalized and underserved, if I can get some examples of tools that you use to reach out to them.
I mean, partially, this is a little bit of a jumping off point. We have done work door to door, and in the past, we actually did that as a randomized control trial. Like, does this work? Does going door to door work? And the answer is, it depends. It works if we're talking about Homestead, which is a very easy program to enroll in. It's something that you can do it on your phone. You can enroll on your phone. We have paper. It's very, very easy. Anyone who owns their home can participate. There's no income or age requirement on that particular program. Where door to door was not successful was programs that required an actual application. So UPA. In that project, we went door to door to houses that were specifically delinquent, and we did not find a statistically significant change in the folks who did not receive the same treatment, for those who applied for an UPA. So then the question is, okay, well, do we need to provide partially filled out applications? Can we dynamically do some things, in particular? Can we utilize text messaging? Like, I think we are very, very open to any ideas that folks have about how we can reach marginalized communities. And specifically, we're coming publicly and saying we don't have the answer, but we are looking to partner.
Rebecca, can I add something? One of the requirements for the Racial Equity Initiative was to have measurable outcomes. So by us being able to concentrate on these 9 census tracts, we can track the success of our outreach and see what's working and what's not working. So that's one of the goals of this project, is to track the success of this initiative and kind of apply the lessons learned to future outreach efforts.
Absolutely. Yes, we have one more question.
A recommendation, you mentioned it before. We have 151 elementary schools throughout the city.
Mm-hmm.
Those schools are safe havens for parents. They're very granular. They're all in that circumference, local. With grades K through 5, a significant number of parents are coming daily to pick up their children. You have a facility, a classroom environment where people, even teachers, may be willing to assist on certain days. You know the demographics, you know the names. They have Classroom Dojo where you can contact people with that most updated information, which is constantly changing.
So for folks who didn't hear on the live feed, our audience member suggested that we work more directly with elementary schools and with the School District of Philadelphia. I think that's a great idea, and it's something we can definitely explore more to, figure out what does that look like. Does it start with a flyer? Does it evolve into a neighborhood pop-up? Does it, is it a postcard home with kids? That's absolutely a great idea that we can explore further.
Probably gonna start with the principal.
Yes.
Because the principal knows how to best communicate,
Mm-hmm.
get the feedback from his students, families.
So,
First to the family.
before I take any more questions from the audience, I do want to make sure that we get to a really important point, which is what are the, let me look at my notes here. So, how did you choose these particular metrics, and what are the pitfalls of a project like this? Like, yeah, we're excited, it's great, but it's not a panacea that's going to solve everything. So where do we need to be aware of?
So I think we chose these metrics, as we mentioned, through iterative discussions. I think that was the most time-consuming part of this process, was trying to decide what was right to include. And I think a lot of discretion had to be made, and we tried to use, a lot of experience and expertise across the department when we were polling people. I think towards the end, this is in, the second iteration of the project. I see this project to continuing to evolve in the future. I think the metrics we have chosen will change in the future. I think one we were hearing constantly towards the end was language equity, or
Mm-hmm.
knowing where there are people that don't speak English as a first language. So I guess there is no perfect set of metrics, and this is where we are now.
Yeah.
Right. Perfect is the enemy of good enough. So
It kind of, right, so I do think one of the challenges was not just sort of the right metrics, but also finding that balance between sort of including so many things that it's almost sort of overly accurate for certain areas and not as accurate for others, and also just becomes really difficult to understand, the more little tiny pieces that go into that final result. On the flip side, if you don't include enough, it's not accurate enough, it's not well-rounded enough. So I think one of the struggles is finding that sweet spot. And like Julia said, I think the great thing about having a plan to use this as a benchmarking tool is we're looking to see if, additional outreach in those areas is having an impact. But another way to put it is we are reevaluating whether these metrics are really the best. And as time goes on, even if they were the best now, they might not be the best later. And so it's a way to, as you're benchmarking, re-look at the process and really make sure that it's useful and it's giving you the correct areas to target, that when you target those areas, it's helping.
Right, and I think one question I think is important for us to address is we kind of can't get away from it, but how do we see, or how do we anticipate bias in this map? What can we expect, and how do we try to combat it?
I think the biggest sort of aspect is being able to be nimble, right? So when we're looking at, we don't have all the data yet, right? We have these sort of initial results. We need that second half of it. We need the outreach to actually happen and to sort of see what that looks like. How does that affect things? And I think that will help give us a sense of, essentially, what you're really talking about is what's working and what isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Because the goal is for that not to be there, right? So really having that constant process of going back and looking at, the other thing about benchmarking is you're not just looking at that overall score, you're looking at those individual metrics. Maybe we managed to improve one, or maybe we improved it for certain areas with certain demographics, but not for other areas. And that kind of helps to be able to rebalance it.
What do you want what do you want folks who view this presentation to take away from this work?
I think one big thing is what we're kind of lacking in the story map is what communications is already doing on a day-to-day basis. We haven't like tracked it up to this point. And this is not to dictate like how you guys do your job at all. This is just another tool for you guys to have in your tool belt. You know, I think I definitely want to give you guys your roses.
Oh, no, you, no.
Like these are.
I just get to show up and like host an event, right? But like there actually is a whole team of people who do a lot of work to do outreach with nearly every day of the week. We are working with our community partners. So.
And I think that feedback is really important too, right?
Mm-hmm.
That this is being shared, right? And so this isn't this isolated private project that we're working on where sort of no one really is allowed to give feedback because they don't fully know about it. And so not only from the public, but from the partners that you're working with, ideally, we would get that feedback.
And feedback that would enable them to also use it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do we make this most useful
Right.
to our partners? So, as we've said, this is this is an evolving project. This is, we expect to, I don't know, do many versions as we go. And I guess just to kind of wrap things up, I'd love to understand like what drives you personally to work on these types of projects.
Sure, I'll start. I think, so I've been with the city for a little over 5 years. And I think revenue sometimes gets seen as kind of a behind the scenes actor, sometimes the bad guy. And a lot of the work that we do, it supports some of the more direct work that other parts of the city do. So a lot of it is a little more indirect. And this is one of those examples where you get to really feel like your work is sort of having a direct impact. Yeah, something else, but go ahead.
Yeah, I would, to add on to that, I have like kind of a similar thing. I started about a year and a half ago and was almost immediately in the racial equity working group, and then started this project really shortly thereafter. So it was really exciting for me to know that like within revenue, within every department, we are actively working on these racial equity initiatives and coming up with these great projects and having great results come from them. So that was great. And then to touch again on what you mentioned, we don't have a lot of public facing work. So it is nice to have something we can share so widely and like so people can see we are doing interesting work. And yeah, really proud of it.
Oh, I'm very proud of it. I'm very excited. Are there any other questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
So in the beginning of the presentation, you said you had about, was it 75% participation?
Right. We estimate that 75% of owner-occupied homes are taking advantage of some real estate assistance program.
So now we're kind of looking at that, I guess, hard to find last quarter of the population. So I think it really shows a lot of due diligence on the part of the department that you're really spending a lot of resources to capture that last quarter. So I think it's really a good jumping off point for the department. So it really, demonstrates that like a commitment to getting the tough last quarter.
I appreciate the sentiment that our audience member said that we're just doing a great job. But I think it's not like the same 25%. That's also the thing. It's always like kind of this revolving sort of door of people who've come off or they become ineligible. Maybe their income has grown, or whatever has happened. They've sold the house, and then the new people, and those hard to find people. Stop question over here.
I think we should rephrase the hard to find people, because you started off saying that you're triangulating the census data with the city's data, and you've come up with a formula with these 9 different boxes, so you actually know exactly where to find them, right?
The previously hard to find people.
Right. I think the question more so is the least prioritized groups of people.
Sure.
And if we begin to recognize that we need to prioritize the least prioritized, then maybe our lens may change and our approach may change.
appreciate that comment. So the audience member said that we need to stop saying hard to reach people, that
Hard to find.
hard to find people. Like we've done it, like we kind of know where we need to be focusing, and we need to think about like the priority, or change our mindset a little bit around thinking about these groups as folks who maybe were not the priority before, and now they are our priority. Yes.
Do you see, like in each segment of the population or the neighborhoods that you've identified, do you see that the programs are the same, or are you able to get granular where you say, in this certain neighborhood, we know these certain programs are beneficial or most beneficial, in another neighborhood, it's a different type? Is it granular like that?
I mean, absolutely. Just from like, you know, things like the senior citizen tax freeze, right? You have to be 65 years or older. And so if we're talking about a particular census tract that trends to be much younger, right? That might not be the right push for that area. Whereas homestead is almost like universal, right? We should be talking about that constantly to anyone and everyone. As we move forward with the low income tax freeze, I think the example of like Bella Vista doesn't necessarily have the same need that other census tracts do. And so definitely you kind of hit the essence of what it is we're trying to do.
So you could tell us that. So if we're doing work in a certain place, we could come to you and you could say, here's the programs we really need to be pushed in this certain place.
So the audience member says, we can tell you, he asks if we can tell our community partners what to focus on. We can absolutely do that, because we can tell you, we can give you a list of delinquent households that have overdue or delinquent taxes, or households that have have delinquent water bills, right? We know, and the other thing that we always kind of keep in mind is that when someone has a tax problem, it is probably the last thing that they are worried about, right? A lot of other things have kind of gone wrong to get to this point. So it is kind of almost like a bellwether metric, right? So real estate data happens to be public. The other tax data is not, and we are often very limited about what we can share. But that's one thing that we can work with community groups for. We can't share anything about income though, so don't ask. We are coming up on 45 minutes, and I just want to thank our panelists. Thank you, Roman. Thank you to the entire racial equity working group. I think that it's very exciting, and to our audience today, you're all lovely and beautiful. Thank you so much. And if you have questions or you have feedback, reach out to us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, X, as well as YouTube and LinkedIn at PhilaRevenue, PhilaRevenue. PhilaRevenue, you can find us, and we are really excited to work with you, and we know it's not perfect. We know that we have work to do. So this is the starting point. Thank you.